Welcome back to another episode of the Life in the Right Lane podcast. Victoria and Nicholas here, and we are back in town from our 4th of July weekend.
Back in action. Fun. Yeah, it was really fun. We got a chance to do a 7.5 mile hike, which it was one of those hikes intense. That it's all downhill the first part, and then it's all uphill going back. And it just makes it like you're already kind of tired. And it makes the last part miserable, but it felt great when we were finished.
Yeah, definitely. We went whitewater rafting too. That was really fun. That
we did. Yeah, let's share the story. We did. So
what's the story? Oh,
we went to the Ocoee River, which is in Georgia, not too far.
It runs through several southern states in the U.S., like Tennessee. I think North Carolina.
I guess we were in Tennessee technically.
Yeah.
We were right on the edge of North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, so I never really knew where we were. But there's a spot where there are rapids that are man-made, and they were made for the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996. So this was the spot where they did their kayaking. And we got a chance to go over that in a raft. And we were getting to watch some other groups go, and we were understanding how you're supposed to navigate. There's one section that is very dangerous. It's one of them they basically tell you if you fall out, you're likely to get sucked under the water, and it'll be really hard to rescue you.
So that's terrifying.
So yeah, that was a good.
Hearing that, we're like, great, and we're about to do that.
Yeah. So anyway, we went off and we made it through part 1, but then we hit part 2 and our raft turned a little bit. And so we were going sideways into the thing that can suck you under. Which was
a class 5
It was a class 5 rapid. And as far as I understand it, that is the highest number that you can achieve in rapids.
It was called... They name all of the different rapids, and this one was called Humongo. So if that gives you any indication as to how big this rapid was, there you go.
It was humongous. So our guide, who was great, ended up spinning us around. So we were headed backwards into it. I think that's how it happened. And we ended up surfing a class 5 rapid and then getting out without anyone falling into the water, which is
like unheard of.
It was crazy. So we enjoyed our time, and they said that no one has really done that before. So that's pretty cool.
We were all on cloud 9, like, that was awesome. This is the greatest thing. We're so good at rafting. And then we're completely humbled, like a minute later when we hit a class 2 rapid. And got stuck surfing it. So surfing, like you just keep going back and forth basically because the water is like...
It's coming from two different directions.
Forces. Yeah.
Sometimes life feels like we're just surfing. Yeah. We're getting pushed and pulled from two different directions and nothing's happening.
Yeah, we've definitely felt that here lately. If you're anything like us, then you're just like kind of in a blah. I know we mentioned like last week, it seemed like everything was going wrong and ants were in our dog's food and car troubles and there's so many things. But we were on a walk the other day and we started, it hit me. We always have like really good talks on our walks. We have good conversations, but that's usually when I do a lot of like my thinking and I just think out loud to Nicholas. And he so graciously always listens. But I started thinking about how crazy it was that the job that I do now encompasses all of the things that I was always told that I wasn't good at, which I found so interesting. I was thinking out loud saying, you know what's so funny? In college... When I did an internship, the guy who was like over me and writing all my like reports back to my professors, he said that I was great at everything, yada, yada. But the thing that I could work on the most is my writing. Well, it's funny because everybody now says I'm an incredible writer. and I do a lot of writing for my job. And I love writing like Instagram posts and just like reflecting and writing out my thoughts. So I found that kind of funny. And then I took it a step further and was like, and also in college, in my whole life, I've never considered myself a creative person. I was never good at like art, and in college, graphic design was like one of the only B's I ever got in college. So that was frustrating. But now most of my job is design and creating things for our clients and being in Photoshop and all these things, which I find so hysterical. And then I took it a step further. And the thing that basically my entire life, I've always been told I'm not a good speaker. I'm not good with my words. I get really nervous like in front of people. And then I thought that's hilarious because I host a podcast. Like, what in the world are the chances? So it got us thinking, how crazy would it be if we let what man said about us dictate our future more than what God says about us? So we wanted to kind of talk about it.
Right.
And just like how different my life would be if I let what all those professors and teachers and peers said about me and what my weaknesses were, like completely destroy anything that I thought I was good at. I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have the jobs that I've had. I wouldn't be good at the things that I'm good at now if I had listened to them and just sat in that defeat and not worked on it, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes people telling you that you need to work on something can actually help you get better. And perhaps when your intern instructor wrote that, you were not the same level that you're at now, and that maybe helped you push yourself.
Right. That's where it can be a good thing. If it's like constructive.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a reason that throughout the Bible, it always talks about speaking life into people. And when you're speaking instruction and correction, you do it graciously and you do it in a way that builds someone up, because the goal should never be to just tell someone you're not good at that, stop doing it. There are so many things that, yes, we may not be great at, but to tear someone down by saying you're not good at this, you should just give up, really, it goes to show how much influence the world has, because so many people listen to that. And so many people hear that every single day.
Yeah, that's really true. And it's really hard to continue to believe the truths that God says about us when the world and everyone around you is saying the opposite. So, I mean, that's just another reason why it's so important to be in the Word, and to listen and obey what God says to do, and hear what He says about us and what He believes over us.
Right. There's a really interesting experiment that my high school psychology class ran. It was unsuccessful, but I think it was an interesting concept. So we took AP psychology. We were seniors, and the entire class was made up of seniors, but there was an experiment where we went and got a freshman from their class and brought them into our classroom. And then we had them answer, after we were done answering, a question about which of these three lines is the longest. So on the board or on the screen, there were three different lines of different lengths. One was clearly longer than the others, but the goal through this experiment was all of the seniors were all going to pick the wrong one, and we would all say back to back to back to back to back the one that was not correct. And then it would get around to the freshmen, and we had a rare occurrence where the freshmen actually looked at us like we were crazy and picked the correct line on the board. And that's really the way that we ought to be as Christians, because we're going to constantly hear from people who are celebrated, who are experts, who are better than us, that there are certain truths that are agreed upon by everyone. A lot of the most powerful truths of our day that are really not truths are pitched as everyone already agrees on these, so there's no need to argue. You can't change anyone's mind on this, so just stop. And a lot of those happen really around Christianity and who Jesus is and what our place in the world is and why we're here and how the world was created. So many things have just been decided by group decision that, well, this is the truth everyone's going to agree on, and if you don't agree on it, you're stupid. So this experiment was designed so that the freshman would see everyone saying the same thing, and then he would say, well, I'm looking at the board and there's clearly one that's longer than the others, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is a trick question and everyone else seems to know something that I don't. So I'm just going to go with what they say. But he had the courage to say, no, I can clearly see there's a line that's longer than the others. So I'm going to say that. That's what we need to have as Christians. And we need to have the knowledge that is rooted in the Word about who God says we are and who he says his people are and what our role is, so that when it comes time for us to have to pick the line that's the longest, we're choosing the one that is clearly correct because we are rooted in something other than the people around us.
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's interesting that in a lot of cases, God will use what we're not good at for his glory because, like the Bible says, in our weakness, he's made strong. And I think one of the reasons why we're weak and why we're feeble, sinful creatures is to prove to ourselves how great our God is.
Yeah.
If we thought that we could do it all on our own, then where's our need for a savior, you know? So I think it's important to recognize, like, apart from God, we can do nothing. We can do no good thing unless we're connected to, what is it, the root? We're the vine? No, he's the vine. We're a leaf. Is that what
there are many different analogies. We were just talking about the root and the branches.
Yeah, branch. That's what it is.
But yes, right? It's the vine, connected to the vine.
Anyways, connected to the source of all truth. But I'm reminded of the story of Moses, and I especially relate because he had a stutter and like couldn't talk very eloquently to people. And mine's, you know, a little different. I don't think I stutter, but that's always been hard for me ever since like middle school. And it's gotten like progressively worse throughout the years. So I definitely like relate to Moses in that way. But despite his weakness, despite the fact that God was calling him to speak to Pharaoh, like the king of the land, and say something so bold and to say something just like crazy at that time and like command Pharaoh, like, God says this, let these people go, let us go. I mean, how crazy to stand up in front of Pharaoh and all of his advisors and whoever was there in this big hall and say something so outrageous and so extreme. To have the boldness to do that when you know that you're not good at that, but you're just following God, what God has commanded you to do. That's amazing. And so that again only shows that it's him in us that we're able to do these bold things, that we're able to grow in our faith, to preach to people when we're scared, to do anything that requires us to take something a step further or step out in faith when we don't feel like we're capable of doing that. But that story just, and there's so many throughout the Bible, but that one particularly sticks out to me because it has to do with speaking. So I like totally relate to it. But I'm just like, wow. And then if you keep going throughout the story, I feel like God will, in this instance with Pharaoh, he gave Moses the boldness to follow through with his command, even when he was scared. But then you keep reading, and God then brings like a solution to help Moses in the form of Aaron, his brother, and said that Aaron will speak on behalf of you because he wasn't great at this. So he brought someone to help him in that. So I feel like God will equip you either by giving you the strength and the boldness to do whatever he's called you to do, or in a lot of cases, he'll bring something to your aid to help you carry it out.
Right.
So anyways, I just think that's really cool because everything in my life, like if God's calling me to something or I feel led to go somewhere, I am scared out of my mind half the time. But just, believing that God's plan is greater than the one that I have for myself helps me follow through with that. And then on the other side, I'm always able to see his plan unfold and how it was so perfect and how I'm now here because I followed where he was leading me, you know?
Yeah. And it also reminds me of the story of Noah, where he continued to be told by everyone else that there's no rain coming, there's no flood. What are you doing? You're out of your mind. But he knew that God had instructed him to do this, and that he kept relying on that truth, that even if he was crazy or he had gone insane, he was going to see it through to the end. And then at that point, he would let whatever happened.
Go ahead.
I thought that story does a great job of showing someone who has been told you're supposed to be doing this, but you receive no affirmation from the outside world. Many times that's the way our story goes. I would say, while there are people like you who hear you're not good at these things, so you shouldn't basically do them, or you really need to work on these. There are also people that hear who know they have a talent. Oh, you're just not as good as you thought you were, or you're not correct. And that makes you doubt yourself. I know in sports, personally, that was my situation where I was good at what I did, but when coaches didn't believe in you, when teammates didn't believe in you, you sank down and you thought, well, I guess I don't have it. I guess I'm not capable of this, even though God has given you that ability. And you end up not performing to the level that you could have performed if you had just followed what God had put in you. And instead, you decided to listen to people around you.
I think Satan's biggest goal is to get us to give up. Because if he can squash what God has given us, then how could we ever be used in his kingdom to further his kingdom here on earth? How can we use our talents that God has given us for his glory and to bring others to know him if we give up on the talents that he put in us to begin with? We can't steward things well. We can't get better at the things that we're already good at if we believe that we can't do it and we just give up and accept defeat. That's where Satan wants you to be. And that's why it's so hard not to believe when the whole world and everyone around you is saying this. And you have to hold on to that truth that God put this gift in you. You're supposed to use it for him. And that you'll get better, whatever it is. It's so hard to do that, but it's very sharpening too. And it really works on your character and works on just who you're meant to be. So we can't give up because that's ultimately what Satan wants us to do.
Yeah, I'm going to make an educated guess and say that Satan can see way more of our potential than we can.
Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that his ability to see where we could be is what determines the level of resistance that we face.
That's a good point. Yeah. And I think as vessels for Christ, that's terrifying to Satan. He wants to take that out as much as he can with every chance that he gets, with every method. I think I've mentioned, have been reading Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And it's so interesting. In every chapter, there's kind of a different scenario. And it's like between two demons, like one is writing to the other who's like an up and coming demon and saying like, in every scenario, the demon who's still learning is saying, you know, basically like, which one do I use for this? What do they say? The patient.
Mm-hmm.
So like, say Nicholas is the patient. And I'm like, well, do I use this weakness or this weakness to get him to fall away from the Lord? And Screwtape, right?
Yeah,
Screwtape?
he's the uncle.
Yeah, he's the uncle. And he's writing back to the little demons saying, it doesn't matter what you use this or that. Use whatever you can that will deter them from the Lord or the enemy, they say in the book. But I just, like, reading that book has been so mind-blowing, like how tactful and crazy the devil is, crazy good at how he gets us to, he uses whatever he can to shift our perspective and to get our eyes off of Jesus. So whether it's too much of a good thing or it's a bad thing, it doesn't matter what he's using as long as it deters you.
Right. Yeah. He can make you prideful in your abilities, or he can make you lose confidence in them. Both would prohibit you from doing the thing that God wants you to be doing for the reasons God wants you to be doing them. But he will use both. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot today, as we have in many other times of history, but obviously this is when we are live, we're seeing a lot of people very openly choosing the things of evil and choosing the things that are 100% opposite to the things that are good, that we know as truth. Things that should be very clearly the longest line are not. And everyone is choosing the thing that is the shortest. And you're confused because you know that this is clearly wrong. Where you are spending your time, who are you celebrating? The things that we know for a fact that are not life-giving are being celebrated as life-giving. And we are at a very crucial decision point as God's people where we can either go along with the crowd and say, you know, I guess we're just going to have to go where there's not as much resistance so we can just keep believing our thing. And that's not the way this works, because if you think that by going with the crowd you're going to have more freedom, you're lying to yourself. You will have fewer freedoms because you're embracing things that are not of God. The way that God works is that he stands firm and there is no movement from him, which means we have to stand firm and we have to hold on to the truths that he has taught us and that we know deep down. And he promises us this is not something that will fade away. The gospel is not going to be overwritten by people who seek to destroy it. They will do everything in their power, and it will appear as though the gospel is eroding, but it's not. It is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and it will be fulfilled in the end.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
So I guess a question I have for you, Victoria, as you've seen that journey from people telling you you're not good at these things to where you are now, what are the things that stand out to you as far as how God worked within you from point A to point B?
Like how I grew?
Right. How do you think God took a person who was most likely believing everything she was hearing about yourself and your abilities? How did you go from that point to where you are now?
Well, I don't know if this answers your question, but I feel like the biggest shift wasn't that I necessarily like went home and worked really hard on my writing and my reading and my speaking and all these things, and I wasn't like studying Photoshop on the weekends. Like, I didn't necessarily think, okay, I suck at these, now I should try really, really, really hard to be better. I just took it with a grain of salt, thought, okay, these are things that I could work on and they don't define me if I never get better at them. but, I'm going to do everything that I can to the best of my abilities to work hard, whatever it is. But I think the biggest difference is not that I necessarily got better at these things. It was that I was willing to do whatever the Lord was calling me to do. So, point being, in my last job, I didn't know that my next job was going to be very design heavy or a decent amount of writing. I didn't know that Nicholas and I would get married or get engaged and want to start a podcast. Like, I had no idea that these things were coming down the pike, but I was willing to answer the call of where God was leading me. And so doing things like this, it is scary. It's very scary. And putting myself out there and trying to, even though people say that I'm not good at this or that, doing it anyways so that God may be glorified through that. I mean, that I think is the biggest thing, is we just have to be willing vessels.
Yeah.
The Bible says, what is it? The harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. And I think that's so relevant to where we are today. There's so many people that call themselves believers, but do they really follow Jesus wholeheartedly every single day in everything that they do and say? I was reading in Proverbs this morning. I can't remember the exact verse, but it was basically saying, listen to God in everything that you do. Look for him, listen for his voice in everywhere you go, and all these different things. And I was just like, how many of us actually do that? How many of us are looking for God when we're at work, or looking for opportunities to serve him, to serve one of his people, to glorify him, to point others to him, to preach the gospel? Like, I feel like now more than ever, we look for opportunities more than we do anything when we're going somewhere to do something. Our first priority, I think, in our minds is, how can we glorify God in this?
Yeah.
Don't you think that there's like a shift?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think two words that really need to be words that describe God's church are awake and obedient. And that we need to be ready and sharp and aware of what's around us. And we need to be willing to step into the next thing that he opens up for us. Because like you said, he's going to equip you for anything that you face. If you look back through history, and the Bible is a continual story about people who were not ready that became ready because of God. You see how many people believe that they have to have everything ready before they start something. And when you talk to even the most successful people in the world, they'll all say, you didn't see how long it took me to get here. You didn't see how much continual, they don't use the word obedience, but continual return to this difficult problem or this difficult school or whatever it is that made me the person I am today and that made me successful. And the way that we can be successful for reaping that harvest is that we are willing to continually return to the things that God is pointing us to, and not questioning his authority, and not questioning whether or not we are good enough for this. Because if God can take people who are completely not cut out to be leaders and turn them into leaders, I think of Joshua, who many times through Exodus and other books of the Bible, where it talks about, for him specifically, do not be afraid. And it makes me think, God took this scared man and he turned him into someone who overthrew people in a land that they had been hoping to conquer for, like a couple generations. Like he took someone who was not ready and he made him ready. So as we go forward into whatever it is God's pointing us to, don't assume that you have to be completely ready to do his work. Don't listen to the other people who might tell you that you're not good enough. I know one person that has all the answers, and he's not on this earth. So that Jesus has the answers. Jesus understands how much talent we have. And not many other people understand because they don't see God working in us. They just see our flesh. So don't be discouraged by that. But at the end of the day, whether we make it this far or this far, far or short, whether we're successful 30 times or just 2 times, God's going to use everything. And in spite of our failures, he will use us if we are willing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. There's a verse in Philippians 4:9 that I just wanted to share real quick. It says, do what you have learned and receive. Wait, let me start over. Do what you have learned and received and heard from me and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. And I love that because God, like we've said, gives all wisdom, all knowledge, all good things, all talents come from him. So we're supposed to obey him through the things that he's given us. And the end part says, and the God of peace will be with you. And I think it says that. I at first was like, oh yeah, that's nice. And then I was like, well, I wonder why it says at the end of what does it say? Do what you have learned and received and heard from God, and like use these things that he's given you. I wonder why it says, and the God of peace will be with you. And then I thought, well, it's probably because when you are in the Lord and you are doing things for him and furthering his kingdom and living in his word and being in community with his people, Satan hates that. The world hates that. Anybody who opposes the Lord will come after you and hate you. So I think that was like a little encouragement at the end of that. Like, when you are in me and I am in you and you're obeying me and following my commands, it will be hard and it will feel turbulent at times. But the God of peace, who surpasses all understanding and is greater than we can even imagine, will be with you. Like, how encouraging is that?
Yeah.
So we hope that this episode was encouraging. I hope that sharing a little bit of my story and just like how the Lord has used me and my weaknesses for his glory, I hope that has been encouraging to you and will hopefully not tell you to just give up and lay down and accept defeat, because that's where Satan wants you to be. But hopefully that means you pick back up where you left off and keep going and keep persevering when it's hard and keep pushing yourself and stay in the word and live for Christ.
Yeah.
It's not always easy, but it is so satisfying and so rewarding, and nothing in this world will satisfy you the way that living for the Lord does.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So again, hope this was encouraging. If you guys have a really encouraging story of something similar, please share it with us. We'd love to hear about it and what the Lord's doing in your life. And we'll be back next week. But in the meantime, keep living life in the right lane.